Hey family, your brother Khalid here from Sons of Africa, Nubian Brotherhood in North America. I'd like you all to please recognize us of m.sonsofafrica.org. That's m.sonsofafrika.org. All right, I'm about to present the articles of our program, what we believe in that we should be about as a people all over the world. All right, as part of the diaspora. The SOA program in positions from 1971. The third revision was 2020 right now. Article 1. We want reparations for the so-called African slave trade and the destruction of pre-colonial Africa and African states, kingdoms, sultanates, emirates, kraals, or however constructed and governed by the people, for the mass murder, mass rape, pillage and destruction, and other unspeakable atrocities and inhumanities against all of those states and peoples, as well as others in other parts of the world, by the pre-modern states of what is now the EU, European Union, but for England or UK amongst the worst racist criminal offenders, headquartered at Brussels, be. We by this include all the modern states derived from and based on these crimes against black and brown humanity in Africa, in the Americas, once called by their progenitors the New World. That by this article, SOA rejects the concepts the international justice and so-called international community, which have become new faces of the old white supremacy foisted upon the whole world to those last remaining holdouts under inhumane eco-wars, racist sanctions, and all-out demonization and acts of war. That is .zw.ir, .kp.cu, .sd, etc. And we reject the Statute of Rome of 1998-2002 and the ICC/CPI established thereby, and we call for all the states of Africa and all the states controlled by peoples of and derived from Africa, included the Caribbean, etc., to withdraw from both the UNSC, where there has been no, nor can be, no true security, until it is restructured to afford to people of African ascent 7.7 billion, all right, permanent representation on said Security Council to be controlled by the Africa Union, so constituted as to guarantee representation to Africans throughout the Americas who are willing as dual citizens of a united Africa. That it be also known that we are not racist or racialist, and that SOA Africa is the origin of humanity, all right? And thus, all humans are Africans, despite also by circumstance of our story or their story being other things. But that all, in truth, all are sons of Africa. Yes, the sons carry daughters, XY, but the daughters, most of them only carry daughters, XX, though some females can carry Y chromosomes, just to be specific here. Thus, to SOA, there is only one race, the human race, and a brother may be any skin complexion or a sister any skin complexion or from any continent or nation or state. Article 2. We want proper education for African people and all people in the public schools, or that we maintain separate education in our own schools, in that education as it has been is considered in the West is just that, Western-centered, the very foundation of white supremacy. As they say in Hausa, Boko Haram. This Hausa group of northern Nigeria has a proper name, which is Jama'atu Ali Is-Sunna Lidawati Wal Jihad, meaning group of people of Sunnah or Dawa and Jihad. It is also known as Waliyat Garib Ifrika, meaning West African province, since March 2015 after becoming part of the Islamic State. The name Boko Haram is usually translated as Western education is forbidden. Haram is from Arabic, haram, forbidden. And the Hausa word Boko, the first vowel is long and the second pronounces a low tone meaning fake, which is used to refer to secular Western education. Boko Haram has also been translated as Western influence is a sin and Westernization is sacrilege. Until the government assassinated its founder, Muhammad Yusuf, the group was also reportedly known as Yusufiya. Northern Nigerians have commonly dismissed Western education as Ilmin Boko, fake education, and secular schools as Makarata, book. The words ilmin, even in Hausa, is just like the word ilm in Arabic, which means knowledge. And Boko in Hausa means fake. Fake knowledge sound anything like Donald J. Trump's fake news, delegitimizing the U.S. media. SOA believe that they're right, at least particularly for people of African ascent, whether ADOS, all right, that ascended out of the diaspora, or not, but for all people. The truth is the truth, and ignorance is ignorance. And men like Darwin and Huxley, though considered the illuminated in London and Paris and New York 200 years ago, they were arrogant and ignorant racist white supremacists. All these who are the founding fathers of their arts and letters and sciences are colored in a time and place where white supremacy took sway over humanity. And being that the people of NG and GN and BF and LR and GH are the people and the places from which the majority of our progenitors were captured and made slaves for white people and the property of white people, any of us could be like our Soldat Abdul Rahman, who is from the state known as GN. And here it must be said that as in this program, SOA advances that Africa, though a continent and the largest on earth, it must also be one country or nation. Sort of like how Europe is trying to be today. That Africa is not where .cn, .ca or US states of the West are so far as wealth, power, and advancement, speaks of the crimes against black humanity perpetrated over centuries. Just as the so-called wealth gap here in the U.S. and all those other gaps where the African ascended and even the indigenous ascended, those in the northern Anglophone conquest and those in the southern Hispanophone conquest, when they come to the USA to be part of the USA, more often than not, they too face a gap in earnings and wealth and opportunity and across the board, just as those of us who are not white and were here from the colonial period. Little do our soldats know that as the USA colonies, or French or Portuguese or Brazil, wherever, were engaged in their crimes in the New World, which included millions of kidnapped Africans, the Africans who were not kidnapped were still yet subjected to unspeakable atrocities, crimes against black humanity, crimes which so-called international justice in the 1990s resolved not to consider in creating the ICC and the CPI. They resolved to not go there when it comes to these crimes. Why? Because their progenitors committed the crimes and reaped and raped the stolen wealth, building their great cities and empires, and our progenitors were the ones robbed and brutalized and raped and disposed of everything down to our lands, our original spirituality, our very language and ways of thinking and being, a state worse than death. Abu Rahman is named after Abdul Rahman Suri, one of the final rulers of the Fouta Djallon in West Africa, where GN is today. He was sold into slavery and ended up being owned by a young white man named Thomas Foster in Natchez, Mississippi. And for 40 years, that this prince served as slave to this white man, leaving wife, sons, father, kingdom, and to marry another slave here. While he went through his ordeal here in Mississippi, his kingdom was being destroyed and his people slaughtered by French colonial armies. Several Muslim sultanates, imamates, and kingdoms who were well organized, modern for their time states with armies and rulers and scientists, and they traded clear across Africa all the way to China and Japan and back as part of an ancient trading network, part of it predating Marco Polo and all those great glorious Nelsons, white explorers and discoverers and criminals and conquerors. We want immunity from conscription into the armed forces of the United States. Article 4. We want immunity from federal, state, and local taxation. Both Article 4 and 5 we claim based upon Article 1. And due to the fact that after all of our history, the ascendants of Africans enslaved in the USA from the beginning have yet in the second millennia to realize an adequate voice in the determination of both the domestic and foreign policies of this nation. That even the Voting Rights Act and other legislations of the current and previous administration and legislature have failed and are failing our people. That the needs, interests, and concerns of our people are now and have always been subordinated to the needs, interests, and concerns of Europeans and Americans of Europeans' ascent. Article 5. We want justice, social, political, and economic justice, as well as true justice in the criminal injustice system of the United States and all over the Americas. We want an immediate end to all police murders, abuse, and brutalization of our people and the inherent and endemic racism in the courts, prisons, and jails of the United States and all over the Americas. Article 6. We want an end to the fake so-called drug war and believe that the first step in ending the supposed crime in our communities, which had become exacerbated over the past century, is to remove the huge profits derived from those who seek such within the illicit trade on drugs. In reality, the enormous profits reaped by those engaged in the trafficking of drugs have never truly benefited our people, but others who exploited our people, and that this includes the government of the United States and certain agencies and individuals within those agencies at one time or another. Yet the police occupation and raids were concentrated in black communities and in communities of color, and the prisons and prison industrial complex, modern system of enslavement, is disproportionately filled with black people and people of color. An open and obvious proof of racism and white supremacy within the criminal justice system or injustice system. We proclaim the right of our people and of all people all over the earth to self-determination and self-defense, that in accord with the Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution of 1791, whereby European colonial armies stole entire continents here in the West and prevailed from then to now, proclaiming such right for themselves, while denying the same rights to the ascendants of Africans, our progenitors enslaved by their progenitors, that we, the ascendants of Africans, victims of yet redress crimes against black humanity, shall not and cannot accept any laws or edicts made by the progeny of the enemies of our progenitors, giving themselves right to bear arms and to self-defense while taking such rights from our people and any people, whether DPRK or the Islamic Republic of Iran, nor can we support or participate in any policy of eco-wars, racist sanctions, or other acts of wars against any people proclaiming for themselves the same rights. Article 8, we want forgiveness of all debt, and even worse, the interest on those debt owed by the nations of Africa and others owed to the nations of the EU and the USA through institutions like the IMF and the World Bank through their policies which have failed Africa, particularly those which participate in or benefit from the enslavement of our people in the West and the destruction and colonization of all of Africa. Article 9, we want statehood for the District of Columbia, an area long predominantly African, American, and people of color, and long denied representation and even effective self-governance. We believe that over decades that this demand was advocated by some among our people. The usual ethnic cleansing that devastated African communities of color or communities of color across the nation, including and especially here in Boston, was designed to ensure statehood would be less likely if there was no longer a black African majority in the district. Regardless, we demand all ethnic cleansing, financial or by criminal justice policies or otherwise, in effect to be immediately halted in the district and in cities across the United States. And that with statehood for the district, with effective self-governance, our representation in the U.S. Senate and the House of Representatives would be enhanced. We also proclaim statehood for Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands, if determined to be the will of the people, all right? However, whoever often struggled to educate and re-educate or organize is always a necessary part of the movement. However, the struggle to re-educate and reorganize is always a necessary part of the movement. We want naturalization and U.S. citizenship for all ascendants of the crimes against Africa and African people known as slave trade, be they from English-speaking, Spanish-speaking, Portuguese, or French crimes against black humanity who have lived in or worked in the United States for at least 5 years or more, beginning from the time of the last revision of this article program, which was 1990. This too would be recognized as part of the reparations of Article 1 above. And I thank you for listening. And, please give us your support. We need support because this is a grassroots. Like you see our resources. I'm doing this on my cell phone. All right. Like this is an infinite game. All right. Because like I'll be dead and gone. But listen, the struggle will continue. All right. It's an infinite game. This ain't an overnight thing. It's an overtime thing. All right. Peace and love, my people.